All right, for today's deep dive, we're cracking open a case file on one of the most chilling legends to ever come out of Norse and Germanic folklore. Let's get right into it, the Wild Hunt.
So let's start with this core description. You've got to understand, this wasn't just some spooky campfire story. For people back then, this was a terrifying reality. It was something they believed they could actually witness, a furious procession tearing across the sky on the coldest, darkest nights.
Okay, so the official name for this is the Wild Hunt. But in Norway, it got an even more dramatic name, the Osgordia, which translates to the Asgard Ride. And that tells you something crucial. People didn't think this was just a bad storm. No, this was a supernatural event. It had a leader, a mission, and believe me, some seriously terrifying consequences.
Just try to picture it. You're huddled inside trying to stay warm during a brutal winter storm. The wind is just screaming. But then you hear something else mixed in with it. A sound that is not natural. The thunder doesn't just rumble, it pounds. It sounds like a whole army of horses galloping right over your head, shaking the very heavens. That's how you knew the hunt was here. And let's be crystal clear, seeing the hunt was never a good thing, not at all. It was an omen, a prophecy carried on the wind. If that spectral army flew over your village, it was a direct warning that something awful was on its way. We're talking war, famine, a devastating plague, you name it. It was a sign that your world was about to be turned completely upside down.
Now, every hunt has to have a leader, right? A huntsman. So, for this next part of our case file, we're going to zoom in on the main figure at the heart of all this chaos, the one leading the charge. Let's build a profile on our number one person of interest.
And it turns out the leader is the big guy himself, Woden, who you probably know better as the Norse god Odin, the All-Father. But this isn't the wise, benevolent Odin you might be picturing. Nope. In this story, he's this grim, shadowy figure, one-eyed, wrapped in a dark cloak, leading a horrifying parade of the dead. It really shows you a much darker, almost primal side of the god of wisdom and war. Of course, a figure like that isn't riding just any old horse. His mount is Sleipnir, a seriously powerful eight-legged steed. And that unnatural eight-legged form is so important because it just screams otherworldly. This isn't a chase happening on the ground. Those 8 legs are what let him gallop right across the sky itself.
Now, Odin wasn't riding solo, not by a long shot. He was followed by this huge, chaotic pack of followers. So in this section of the file, let's take a closer look at his entourage and figure out what exactly they were up to, their, modus operandi.
And this is interesting. It wasn't just a random rampage. The hunt actually had specific targets. They were after the souls of the dishonorable, traitors, cowards, that sort of thing. But they also went after restless spirits and, this is the really scary part, living humans who had committed terrible sins. It was like a twisted form of divine justice sweeping across the sky.
And this gives us the whole picture of the hunting party. You've got the host of spirits and these massive wolves. But you also have Odin's famous ravens, Hugin and Munin, which mean thought and memory. And in this story, they're not just his messengers, they're his scouts, flying out ahead of the hunt to find the prey, to spot the very souls they were coming for. Okay, so we've got a pretty good profile of the hunters, but what about the people on the ground? What was it like for them? Let's pivot our investigation now to the witness accounts, to the stories and folklore that tell us what happened if you actually saw the hunt, and, more importantly, how you might just survive it.
This is where it gets really fascinating, because there were different versions depending on where you were. The general Germanic myth focused mostly on sinners, but the Norwegian version, the Osgria, that was way more terrifying. Its victims weren't just bad people. They were anyone who died a violent or untimely death. It didn't matter if you'd sinned or not. And it was something people were especially afraid of during the Yule season.
Yeah, and this really drives home just how tragic the Osgorja was. It wasn't just fallen warriors. It swept up murder victims, suicides, even women who died during childbirth, basically any soul that was seen as being in a state of unrest. In a very strange, dark way, the myth gave these forgotten souls a mythological home, a place in the cosmic order, even if it was a terrifying one.
So, the big question is, what were you supposed to do if you heard that ungodly howling coming your way? Well, folk wisdom had a pretty clear survival guide. The moment you heard it, you were supposed to throw yourself face down on the ground. The idea was to avoid being seen so you wouldn't get swept up into the underworld. But honestly, the safest bet was just to stay inside. Don't even risk becoming a witness.
All right, we've examined the evidence, profiled the leader, identified the victims, and reviewed the witness accounts. It's time to close this case file. For our final analysis, we're going to shift from the what to the why. Why did a myth this powerful even exist?
When you boil it all down, the Wild Hunt was really a tool, a way for people to cope. It was how they made sense of the absolute chaos of winter storms. But it was also about something deeper, a primal fear of death, and this belief that the dead could actually come back, restless and, well, dangerous. The story took all that unknown terror and gave it a name, a leader, and a purpose.
And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? The Wild Hunt isn't some dusty old story. It is a foundational piece of folklore. It's like a direct phone line to the fears and anxieties of our ancestors, a powerful testament to their relationship with nature, with death, and with that huge, scary, supernatural world they absolutely believed was real.
And that pretty much brings us to the end of our case file. The Wild Hunt gave a face and a story to the chaos of winter and death. And that leaves me with one last thought for you. What are the wild hunts of our modern world? What stories do we create to make sense of the great, frightening unknowns we face today?